Tessa Soren nearly tripped over her untied shoelace as she burst through the hospital's sliding glass doors, a bouquet of daisies clutched tightly in her hand. "Room 317, she muttered, checking the text her friend had sent earlier that morning. Her cheeks were flushed from the cold and the sprint from the parking lot, her ponytail half falling out. She hadn't planned on spending her Sunday in a hospital, but when her best friend Karina called her after a surprise appendectomy, Tessa didn't hesitate. They'd been friends since college. Karina was practically family. Visiting hours are until 8, the nurse at the reception desk called out as Tessa passed by, but she just nodded, barely slowing down. The elevator dinged as it opened on the 3rd floor. As she stepped out, her gaze unintentionally locked on the man standing at the vending machine down the hall. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a long black coat over a tailored gray suit. His back was to her, but something about the way he moved controlled, efficient made her look twice. She shook it off, not the time. Karina was waiting. Tessa pushed open the hospital room door. "Hey, you look like you fought a raccoon and lost." Karina laughed weakly from the bed. "You're late. I stopped to buy you flowers." "These things don't grow in the parking lot." "You brought me daisies," Tessa shrugged, grinning. They were the only ones that didn't look like funeral arrangements. She set them on the bedside table and pulled a chair closer, then started unpacking the snacks she stuffed into her tote bag. "I brought chocolate, dry shampoo, and a portable charger. You're welcome." Karina's smile grew. "You're a saint." 15 minutes passed, filled with light teasing and laughter. Tessa was mid-story about her chaotic morning shift at the diner when the door creaked open behind her. "Sorry to bother, wrong room." Tessa turned, and her breath caught. It was the man from the vending machine, now up close. He looked even more unreal. His sharp jawline, dark hair swept back, stormy gray eyes. His gaze landed on Tessa for a second too long before turning back toward the hallway. "No worries," Tessa said quickly, blinking. "Third room on the left," Karina offered, pointing. "Thanks." His voice was low, smooth, but there was something distracted in the way he lingered on Tessa before nodding and stepping out. The door clicked shut. Karina raised an eyebrow. "Whoa, what? You didn't see the way he looked at you? I felt the electricity from here." Tessa rolled her eyes. "He was just confused," Karina smirked. "Sure he was." 3 doors down, Sterling Thorne leaned against the wall outside his godmother's hospital room, staring at the floor. He hadn't meant to walk into the wrong room, but then again, he hadn't expected to see her. That girl. Messy ponytail, jeans, oversized sweater, laughing like she hadn't a care in the world. Most people in hospitals looked like shadows. She looked like sunlight. He ran a hand across his face. He was here for one reason, to visit his godmother, Margaret, who'd raised him after his parents passed. He didn't have time for distractions, especially not ones with bright green eyes and sarcastic smiles. Still, he found his thoughts drifting back to her. The next day, Tessa returned to the hospital with a small journal for Karina. She was just about to knock on the door when she heard loud coughing from the room across the hall. She paused, concern flickering across her face. The door was ajar. Inside, an older woman with striking white hair was struggling to sit up, her oxygen mask slightly askew. Tessa didn't think she pushed the door open wider. "Hi, sorry, I'm not a nurse, but do you need help?" The woman looked up, startled. "Oh. Yes, thank you, dear." Tessa walked in, gently adjusting the mask and helping her sit up. "There, better," the woman nodded, smiling weakly. "I'm Margaret." "Tessa, lovely name," Margaret said, patting her hand. "You're not visiting me, are you?" "No, my friend's across the hall." "I just heard you, and I used to help take care of my grandma." Margaret's eyes sparkled. "You're a kind soul." "Not always," Tessa laughed, "but I try. Would you mind staying for a minute?" My godson stepped out, of course. Sterling returned moments later, carrying 2 coffees, and stopped short when he saw her. Tessa, she was sitting beside Margaret, making her laugh. He stepped in. "Making new friends without me, Aunt Mags," Margaret grinned. "Sterling, meet Tessa." "She saved me from suffocating." Tessa stood quickly. "I just helped with her mask." Sterling handed his godmother a coffee, then turned to Tessa. "Still, thank you." Their eyes held for a moment. "Well," Tessa said, stepping back, "I should let you two catch up." Sterling didn't want her to leave. Hey, wait, can I walk you out? Just for a minute, Tessa hesitated. Okay, they stepped into the elevator in silence. At the lobby, Tessa turned to him. So, you're Margaret's godson? She basically raised me. I visit every day. She's lovely. So are you. The words left his mouth before he could stop them. Tessa blinked. Sorry, that was no, she said, smiling softly. Thank you. He held the door open for her as they stepped outside. Can I take you to coffee sometime? As a proper thank you for helping Margaret, Tessa looked up at him, unsure. You don't even know me. I know you didn't hesitate to help a stranger. That's enough for me to want to take you to coffee. She hesitated for a beat. Then pulled a pen from her bag and wrote her number on his palm. Prove you're not secretly a serial killer and maybe I'll let you. Sterling watched her walk away, a grin tugging at his lips. He hadn't planned on meeting anyone today. But the girl who walked into the wrong hospital room just might be the one who walked into his life. Tessa adjusted the strap on her shoulder as she stepped into the corner cafe 2 blocks from the hospital. She hadn't expected him to actually call. Honestly, she figured guys like him all expensive wool and watch you don't trip charm didn't bother following up. But Sterling had remembered exactly what she'd said and suggested a place she'd mentioned liking. That alone had thrown her off. She scanned the room. He was already there. He stood when he saw her, his coat draped over the back of the chair, sleeves of his navy sweater pushed to his elbows. He looked less like someone who owned a boardroom and more like someone who read novels in the park and made his own coffee in the morning. It threw her again. You're early, she said, sliding into the seat across from him. You're late, he replied, lifting his cup. But since I didn't bring you daisies, I figured I had no right to complain. Tessa let out a quiet laugh. You remembered. I remember things that matter. Their drinks arrived. She stirred hers, eyes narrowing slightly. So, is this your usual approach? Invite strange women you meet in hospital rooms out for coffee, only when they walk in like a tornado and leave my godmother singing their praises. Tessa leaned back, studying him. You're hard to read. That's intentional. Well, you're doing a great job at it. He tilted his head, expression shifting. And you, what do you do when you're not rescuing elderly women from faulty oxygen masks? She hesitated for a second, then shrugged. I work at a diner on the East End. It's not glamorous, but the coffee's strong and the regulars tip like it's the 1980s. He nodded slowly. Do you like it? Some days, others, I imagine what it might feel like to quit spectacularly, maybe throw a pie at someone. I'd pay to see that. Tessa grinned. I'll let you know when it happens. You can bring the bail money. She sipped her drink, studying him over the rim. So, Sterling, what's your story? Don't say finance or real estate. You give off too much mystery for that. He didn't answer right away, just watched her for a beat. Then he said, I run a company, Thorn Industries. Her brow lifted. That sounds big. It is. What do you make? A mess, mostly, but officially, we develop logistics software, global supply chain optimization, boring stuff unless you're knee-deep in it. She blinked once. That's incredibly specific, and incredibly dull at parties. I don't know, she said. I kind of like that you just dropped that in the middle of a conversation like it was nothing. I didn't want to lead with it. Why not? Because every time I do, the tone shifts. She traced a finger along the rim of her cup. Maybe the problem isn't what you say. Maybe it's who you're saying it to. He looked at her, really looked, and something flickered in his eyes. Maybe. Outside, clouds rolled in over the skyline, casting a silver tint across the windows. The light dimmed slightly, but inside, everything felt oddly still. Sterling set his cup down. I don't usually do this either. Which part? This. Sitting across from someone I barely know, wishing time would slow down. She didn't move, didn't answer. Just watched him with that same unflinching focus she'd had the first day, like she was always measuring how much she could risk. After a moment, she said, You don't seem like someone who wishes for anything. I didn't, until you walked into the wrong room. She swallowed hard, then her phone buzzed. She glanced down, frowning. That's Karina. They're discharging her early. I need to go. Of course. He stood when she did. This time she didn't rush. As they stepped outside, the wind had picked up, sending her hair across her face. Sterling gently tucked a strand behind her ear, not possessively, not dramatically, just like he'd wanted to for the last hour. "Can I see you again?" he asked. She looked up at him, then nodded once. "Yes," she said, "but next time you're paying, and I want to hear the real stories, not the polished ones. You'll get them." She turned toward the hospital, but before she took a step, she stopped. "Sterling, yeah, don't let your guard down too quickly." "Why?" "Because some of us haven't decided if we're worth the risk yet." Then she walked away. And for the first time in years, Sterling felt like he wanted to prove himself to someone who didn't need him but might choose him anyway. Tessa stood behind the counter of the diner, her apron dusted with flour and her fingers stained from slicing beets for the lunch special. The lunch rush had slowed to a dull hum, and she leaned against the register, staring out the window as fat drops of rain began to fall against the glass. It had been 3 days since coffee with Sterling. He hadn't called, hadn't stopped by the hospital, and hadn't shown up at the cafe again, which was fine. She wasn't the type to wait around for a man, especially not one who wore Italian shoes and carried himself like he'd never had to chase anything in his life. Still, she felt the absence of something she wasn't sure she'd ever had. The bell above the door jingled and she glanced up, expecting one of the regulars. Instead, Sterling walked in. He wore a dark raincoat, his hair damp from the downpour, and his eyes locked onto hers like he'd been searching for her on every street in the city. Tessa blinked slowly, then straightened. "You found the East End," she said. "I've been here since noon," Sterling replied. "I ordered the worst sandwich I've had in years at the place across the street just to keep an eye on your door." She raised an eyebrow. "That's a lot of effort for someone who doesn't return calls." "I didn't call because I didn't want to do this over the phone." He stepped closer, resting his hands on the counter. "I need to ask you something, and I wanted to look you in the eyes when I did." She crossed her arms. "Is this where you tell me you have a secret family in Prague, or that your company is actually a front for laundering art?" "No," he said, his voice low. "I want to take you somewhere, tonight," she laughed, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Sterling, I don't have a closet of cocktail dresses waiting to be worn. My night plans usually involve takeout and falling asleep to documentaries. I'll take care of everything. You don't have to lift a finger. Just meet me outside this diner at 7. She hesitated. "And if I say no, then I'll still come back tomorrow and the next day until you say yes." Tessa watched him for a long moment, then finally sighed. "You're lucky. I hate the idea of someone wasting perfectly good persistence." That night, the rain had turned into a soft drizzle by the time Tessa stepped out from the diner. She hadn't known what to expect when she agreed to go. Certainly not the navy Bentley parked at the curb or the man standing beside it holding a black coat for her. "You didn't think I'd let you freeze in that," he said, draping it over her shoulders. She glanced down. The fabric was thick and warm, and the tag inside read a name she couldn't pronounce. "You really don't do anything halfway, do you?" "I don't know how." The driver opened the door and she slid into the leather interior. She felt the shift immediately. The scent of polished wood, expensive cologne, and something she couldn't name but recognized as wealth clung to the air. They drove in silence for 15 minutes, until the car pulled up to a building with floor-to-ceiling windows and a valet already waiting beneath a glowing awning. Tessa stepped out slowly. "You brought me to a private gallery," he nodded. "It's closed to the public on Mondays. I made arrangements." She stopped walking. "Sterling, this is a lot, I know. I thought maybe dinner, not having a museum to ourselves. I didn't want to just talk. I wanted you to see something that matters to me." He led her inside, past a foyer of slate and brushed copper. The gallery walls were lined with abstract pieces full of steel and fire, the kind of art that made you feel something before you understood it. "My mother painted," he said, motioning toward a small canvas on a side wall, "not professionally, but she loved it." Tessa stared at the painting. It was a storm of blue and gold, streaked with shards of crimson. It looked like something breaking open. "She died when I was 11, he continued. "That's the last thing she ever painted." Tessa turned to him slowly. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because I don't want to keep hiding behind polite conversation. I'm tired of meeting people who only want the parts of me that are polished. I'd rather show you the pieces that still hurt." She laid a hand lightly on the glass frame. "It's beautiful." She painted it after my father died. I never understood it until I got older." Sterling stepped closer. "I've spent most of my life building walls that looked like skyscrapers, but you just walked into one of them without asking." Tessa tilted her head. "And now what? Now I want to know if you're willing to stay, even if it gets messy." She looked at him carefully. "I don't fall easily. I'm not asking you to fall, I'm asking you to walk with me. Just a little further." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she turned back to the painting, the silence humming between them. Finally, she said, "Then don't expect me to pretend this isn't terrifying." "I wouldn't respect you if it wasn't." They stood there, two people in a room full of ghosts and color, and for the first time neither one looked away. Outside, the rain finally stopped. The first warm day of spring arrived unannounced, chasing the last of the winter chill from the air. Tessa stood at the edge of the rooftop garden, her jacket draped over one arm. It still didn't feel real being here, in a space so far removed from the clatter of plates and the hum of neon lights she was used to. Sunlight danced off the manicured hedges and glass-paneled railing. The breeze carried the scent of jasmine and something richer lemon trees blooming in ceramic planters. Behind her, Sterling approached, his footsteps muffled on the stone pathway. "You always look like you're about to leave," he said. "I've never stayed in a place like this before," she replied without turning. "It's just a rooftop." "It's not. It's a world." He stopped beside her. "Then stay in it with me." She glanced at him. "You say it like it's easy." "I say it like I mean it." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small envelope. She frowned but took it. Inside was a folded piece of paper printed but with his unmistakable handwriting at the bottom. It was a letter, an offer. She read the first few lines, her eyes narrowing. "This is a proposal." "Yes. You want me to manage a grant program for small businesses?" "I've seen the way you talk about people who never get a real chance. I can fund the program, but I want you to run it. You know what it means to struggle for something. That perspective is more valuable than anything I could ever buy." She stared at him, heart thudding. "You built this for me?" "No, I built it because you made me want to do something that matters." Her voice dropped. "You're serious about this?" "I've never been more serious about anything." She hesitated. "I don't even have a degree in this kind of work." "That's why I hired a team to support you. You'll have guidance, you'll have control. And you'll have me if you want." The wind picked up, rustling the paper in her hand. "You're not afraid I'll say yes just to be close to you. I'm afraid you'll say no because you think you don't deserve it." She stepped back, needing space. It's overwhelming. "I'm not used to the world tilting like this." He didn't follow her. "Then let it tilt. Let it be different. You walked into the wrong hospital room and it changed everything for me. I know how that sounds. I don't care." She looked at him, eyes fierce. "You're asking me to leap." "I know. But look around, Tessa. You're already halfway in the air." The letter crinkled in her hand. Her voice was quiet. "If I say yes and it falls apart, then I'll be the one to catch you." She laughed, once shaky and unsure. "You always have the perfect thing to say, don't you?" "No," he said. "Just the truest thing I can find." She folded the letter and held it to her chest. "I'll do it. For the people who don't get to dream this big, and because pretending I'm not already in love with you would be the biggest lie I've ever told." He didn't ask her to repeat it. He didn't need to. He crossed the few steps between them and kissed her slow, certain, and everything the last few weeks had been building toward. There, in the center of a rooftop that overlooked a city full of strangers, they stopped pretending to be anything but completely undone by each other. Later that evening, Margaret sat propped up in her hospital bed, a soft blanket over her lap and a satisfied smile on her lips. Sterling stood beside her, one hand in his pocket, the other holding Tessa's. "I told you she was special," Margaret said, her voice raspier than usual but filled with warmth. Sterling kissed her forehead. "You did." Tessa squeezed Margaret's hand gently. "You're the one who made me stay that day." Margaret's eyes twinkled. "I just let you see what was already there." A nurse came in to check her vitals, and Sterling stepped aside, guiding Tessa into the hallway. The sun had started to set, casting a rose-gold glow through the windows. He turned to her. "There's something else." She raised an eyebrow. "You're full of surprises today." "It's not a surprise, it's a promise." He reached into his coat again, this time pulling out a small velvet box. He didn't drop to one knee. He didn't make a speech. He simply opened it. Inside was a ring, elegant, nothing flashy. A single sapphire surrounded by a halo of diamonds. Tessa's breath caught. "I won't rush you," he said. "This isn't about proving anything. It's not about timing. It's about knowing that whatever this is, it's not temporary." She stared at him, then at the ring. "You didn't ask a question." "Do I need to?" She took a long breath, her heart a riot in her chest. "Not anymore." He slipped the ring onto her finger and she didn't flinch. She didn't run. She didn't question whether she belonged in his world. Because the truth was, they'd built a new one between hospital rooms and coffee shops, between mistakes and second chances. One where neither of them had to pretend anymore, and in that world they weren't opposites, they were inevitable. The ballroom glowed beneath a canopy of chandeliers, their golden light reflecting off crystal glasses and the polished marble floor. A string quartet played near the grand staircase, the music weaving through the murmuring crowd dressed in tuxedos and floor-length gowns. The air hummed with the kind of energy only the ultra-wealthy could summon, but none of it reached Tessa, not really. She stood at the edge of it all in a midnight blue gown, fitted at the waist, the silk cool against her skin. Her heels were higher than she was used to, but the man standing beside her made her forget her footing entirely. Sterling leaned in just enough to be heard over the music. "You're doing better than half the board members, and they've been attending events like this since birth." "I haven't tripped yet," she whispered back. "That's a personal victory. You looked like you belonged the moment you walked in." She turned toward him, catching the sincerity in his eyes. "I'm still learning how to breathe in this world." "You're not just breathing, Tessa, you're remaking it," he offered his hand. "Dance with me." She hesitated, then placed her fingers in his palm. He guided her onto the floor, leading her through the slow rhythm with a confidence that grounded her. Around them, people whispered, some out of admiration, others out of curiosity. She recognized none of their faces, but all of them knew his. Sterling Thorne never danced, until now. "I think you just made a headline," she murmured. "Good. I'm tired of hearing about acquisitions. Let them talk about love for once." Her chest tightened at the word. She didn't reply. Instead, she leaned her head against his shoulder, letting herself slip into the moment. Later, as the night wound down, Sterling led her through a private corridor off the main hall. The sound of the party faded behind them. He opened a double door at the end, revealing a smaller room bathed in soft light. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed a view of the city skyline, and in the center stood a table set for two, with candles flickering low. She stopped. "You planned this?" "I wanted to end the night somewhere quiet, just us." She walked toward the window, fingers brushing the glass. "I used to stare at this skyline from the diner's alley on my break. Pretend I lived in one of the buildings with the lights always on." He joined her, slipping his hand around her waist. "Now you don't have to imagine." She turned to face him. "It still feels like I'm living someone else's life." "Then maybe that life wasn't big enough for you to begin with." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small key. "This is for the space above the community center. The one you said would be perfect for the grant headquarters." Her eyes widened. "You bought the building?" "No, I convinced the city to lease it to your foundation for $1 a year, permanently." Tessa blinked, speechless. "I didn't want to build something around you," he said. "I wanted to build it with you." She stared at the key in her hand. "I don't know how to deserve this." "You don't have to, you just have to say yes." She looked up. "Then yes, to all of it." He smiled, genuine, open, unguarded, and then he kissed her, nothing held back, no hesitation. It was the kind of kiss that didn't need promises. It was the promise. A week later, they stood at the foot of a small platform inside the newly painted lobby of the foundation building. Sterling wore no tie for once, sleeves rolled, hands tucked into his pockets as he watched Tessa speak to the gathered crowd. Her voice carried with quiet conviction, her words heartfelt, unscripted. She spoke of second chances, of the fierce belief that people could grow when given space to rise. After the applause, she stepped down and walked straight to him. "You were brilliant," he said. "I was terrified. You didn't show it." She smiled, then tucked her hand into his. "I keep waiting for something to go wrong." He kissed her temple. "This." This is what happens when everything finally goes right. Months passed in the rhythm of a life they built day by day. Tessa found herself immersed in the work, interviewing applicants, launching pilot programs, watching small businesses bloom under the weight of belief and support. Sterling never hovered, never tried to shape it into his image. He simply stood beside her, proud and present. They traveled when they could, quiet places with no reception, where he cooked pasta with too much salt, and she fell asleep in hammocks with her book open. They argued sometimes about ridiculous things like how to load the dishwasher or whether jazz was music or chaos, but they always came back to laughter. On a quiet morning in late autumn, they stood on the balcony of their apartment, wrapped in blankets, watching the city wake below them. The air smelled like cinnamon and wet leaves. "I want to marry you somewhere no one knows us," Sterling said, his voice low. She turned to him. "You do? I want it to be ours, not a spectacle, not a headline." Her heart softened. "Then let's go," and they did. In a small village on the Amalfi coast, beneath a grove of olive trees and the fading blush of a Mediterranean sunset, they exchanged vows written in private. There were no photographers, no press. Just a handful of people who loved them, the scent of lemon blossoms, and a string quartet that played only for them. They danced barefoot on ancient stone, laughed until they cried, and kissed as if the world had narrowed down to just the two of them. And in every day that followed, through quiet breakfasts, new ventures, unexpected joys, and the softness of steady love, they chose each other again and again, not because they had to, but because it had always been inevitable.